stone. Stand up and call your soul your own. Go on alone, go on alone. Banish weakness, go on alone. Go on alone, go on alone. Don't look back, just go on alone.
Our reading is taken from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This is week 37, and our topic is Truth Invites, It Never Commands. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Free will is a basic principle of life. God never coerces. He invites us to live in such a way that we find fulfillment in ourselves. If we refuse to live rightly, Paramahansa Yogananda taught, God simply says, I will wait. We have eternity to live. In that eternity, we live as we choose, in self-created darkness, a darkness as intense and as long-lasting as we choose, or in the infinite light, the true self, which is God. Jesus Christ in the Beatitudes offered a beautiful example of God's way of inviting mankind to seek perfection, not by commanding, but by offering his human children the incentive they need to choose the right of their own volition. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Jesus said, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. In each of the Beatitudes, Jesus explains the blessing attendant upon observing it. The divine way, similarly, for each of us is not to do violence to our own natures. Spirituality must be attained naturally. It can never be attained by force. The Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, even the wise behave in accordance with nature as it is manifested in them. Of what avail then is suppression? The scripture then goes on, however, to explain that this doesn't mean we should surrender to the dictates of our lower natures. Rather, it emphasizes our need to aspire to the heights, but each of us in accordance with his own nature and not in imitation of anyone else's, offering ourselves up for purification by divine grace. Desire, whatever form it takes, so the Bhagavad Gita explains, should be resisted, even if only mentally. Attachment and repulsion to sense objects, both of these are universally rooted. No one should accept their influence, for verily they are man's enemies. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Morning, everyone. How is everybody today? Yay, thank you all for coming this morning. It is a joy to be here together. We're going to start with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is Yogananda's book of prayer demands and poems. And this is his poem called God's Boatman. I want to ply my boat many times across the gulf after death, and return to earth's shores from my home in space. I want to load my boat with all those waiting, thirsty ones who have been left behind, that I may carry them to the opalescent pool of iridescent joy, there where my Father distributes his all-desire-quenching liquid peace. Oh, I will come back again and again, crossing a million crags of suffering. With bleeding feet I will come, if need be 1,000,000,000 times, as long as I know that one stray brother is left behind. I want thee, O God, that I may give thee to all. I want salvation, that I may give it to all. Free me then, O Lord, from the bondage of this body, that I may show others how they too can free themselves. I want thine everlasting happiness, but I want also to share it with others, that all my brothers may find the way to happiness forever and forever in thee. Om, peace, I am. Amen. This poem truly highlights the importance that God and Guru put on us coming back to them. That creation was designed in such a way that God will not force us to come to us, for us to come to him, that he will wait till we're ready, and it's our choice. As our topic, truth invites, it never commands. This is the way. I am reminded of something that Sri Yukteswar said, who was Yogananda's guru, and it was quite stern. He says, man cannot advance on the spiritual path without the natural love of the heart, meaning that we need to engage our natural love of the heart, our desire, our longing needs to be awakened for us to go deeper on the spiritual path. And we're reminded by the gurus that we all have that longing for the spiritual path. But what happens perhaps through the years, through lifetimes, that longing and that desire for God gets clouded or it gets closed off. And we get caught in the world and all that's happening and all those things, and we tend to seek those things, and then we find that maybe years have gone by or lifetimes or whatever. We're like, wait a minute, what about that desire, that longing for that true freedom, for that true joy, for that deep inner wisdom that we were reminded of this morning in our affirmation. And when the masters come, they come when we're ready. They come when they hear that call deep from within our hearts. And when they come, they bring so much. When we think of what Yogananda brought, he brought us techniques of meditation, deep philosophy, ways on how to live, just all sorts of things. But more than all of that, they bring what? Their vibration and their consciousness. There was a rabbi who was visiting a village. He had not visited it for many, many years. And he was coming to visit, and everyone in the village was so excited because they were going to get to see him. So they were getting the village ready. But plus, they were coming up with a whole bunch of questions to ask him because he hadn't been there in a while, and they wanted to ask him all these deep spiritual questions. So when he arrived, he made a point to connect with every single person. He didn't say anything, but he just looked at each one in their eye real deeply, their eyes. And then he just started to hum. And he started to hum this tune that was quite exotic. No one had ever heard it before. And the others, they just didn't know what to do. But because it was so different and there was something different about it, they started to hum along with him. And then after a little while, he started to sing. And again, the melody was so beautiful. They had never heard anything like this. So that everyone around him also started to sing the same melody. And then after a little while, the rabbi started to move, just real gracefully, gently moving his body. And again, they didn't know what he was doing, but they were tuning in and they were noticing his movement was coming from deep inside. So they too started to move with the rabbi. And then after a little while, the rabbi started to dance. And they too were so inspired. They'd never seen dance like this, coming from deep center. And they started to dance with the rabbi. And this went on for a good hour or so. And then finally he stopped and he just looked around and he said, "It was wonderful to connect with all of you. I hope I've answered all of your questions." And so it's a beautiful reminder that they come and they share, the great ones, the masters come and share their vibration with us. There's a beautiful story in the autobiography of a yogi when Swami Kriyananda first met Paramahansa Yogananda. Yogananda asked Swami Kriyananda, he said, "How did you like my book, Autobiography of a Yogi?" And Swami Kriyananda said, "Oh, it was wonderful, sir." And Yogananda replied, "It's because it has my vibrations in it." And it's a really sweet vignette in the book. And Swami Kriyananda wrote, "Vibrations? I never thought of a book as having vibrations." Clearly, it had some really deep thoughts and philosophical things that he brought up. But more than that, he said, it did awakening, a deepening awareness in me. And again, that's what the masters bring more than anything. They bring their vibration, they bring their consciousness, and they invite us to join them in that. We are honoring today, and we're going to be celebrating on Tuesday the anniversary of the discipleship of Swami Kriyananda to Yogananda. And it'll be a beautiful evening. It's Tuesday night here at 7 o'clock. We invite you to come. There will be stories, readings about that moment when Swami Kriyananda became his disciple. And it's just, again, it's from the autobiography of a yogi and also the new path that Swami Kriyananda wrote. But when Swami met Yogananda, the first words he said to him was, I want to be your disciple. Never, he said, had I uttered those words before. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what a guru meant. I didn't know any of these things. But he said, I knew I wanted to know God. And in Yogananda's presence, I could feel that he knew God. And I knew that I could find God through that. Many years ago, fast forward, Swami Kriyananda then, he was a direct disciple of Yogananda. He founded Ananda. And in the early days of Ananda, it was brought to Swami's attention that attendance at Sunday service had gotten quite low. People just weren't coming. And Swami Kriyananda said, okay, well then I'll do Sunday service from now on for a while. And again, that's a beautiful example of how Swami always inspired from above, never pushed from below. And this is what our reading is reminding us. The saints and the masters will never push us and say, you've got to do this, but they'll inspire from above. That's the practice of our meditation techniques, of Kriya Yoga. We're always lifting the energy up the spine, to higher aspirations, right? To the point between the eyebrows, to that divine consciousness. And so this topic this morning, again, is a beautiful reminder that they're here to inspire us, they're here to guide us, but we need to take that first step, okay? And then opening our hearts, developing that yearning from the heart. And how do we do that? Through meditation. The more we meditate, the more in those periods of deep meditation, again, we let go of the world, we let go of those thoughts, those habits, those fears. And it has to be deep meditation because it's hard. I remember when I first started meditating years ago, I could only sit still for about 2 or 3 minutes. But I did it twice a day, and then that yearning begins to grow. It seemed like an impossible task. How could I possibly sit there twice a day for 15 minutes? No way. I could only do a few minutes. But by that practice and putting that effort out, that yearning grows through the meditation, through developing devotion, through chanting, through listening to music. We can open our hearts up so our heart remembers that devotion, that love that we have for the masters, so that we could go deeper on the path through service together, through coming to places like this where we could support each other. It's so important. As Daiva shared earlier in the service, the world needs so much our energy, our love, our prayers for its healing. And what a better way to join together our energies and give that love, give our prayers together in unison. But all we have to do is just take a tiny step. Krishna promises it in the Gita, even a leaf, a fruit, or a flower offered to me in my name. Those are not really big things. We think sometimes it has to be this big gesture, but even a leaf, a fruit or flower, or anything like that offered to me in my name will be accepted with great joy. Master tells us he's going to accept that with great joy, and he will be there to take us and guide us to our next step of self-realization. And then into that deep inner wisdom, that really knowing that everything that comes in life, the affirmation was so beautiful, through all tests, through anything that happens, the ups and the downs of life, knowing that God is still always with me, and taking that step, baby steps, as somebody, as we would say. But it's one step at a time. And Yogananda reminds us always, take care of the moments, just in this moment. And then the years take care of themselves. And we have many moments in a day. If we miss it this moment, that's okay. There's another moment coming. Next moment, remembering God, remembering that they will be there to take us, to show us the way. And in that way, too, then we'll know our true freedom in God. So God bless us all on our journey. And Daiva will be sharing now also.
Morning. We are so convinced that we know how it's supposed to work. We are also convinced that and the truth be told, we must know a lot because our lives are more filled with grace than many if you look around the world. Let's think for just a moment about the direct line between our thoughts, our actions, and our experience of life. Because there's a direct line. It's one of the things that the masters try and tell us, is that how we hold ourselves, how we think, how we live has no consequence. And it draws back to us experiences that are in tune with what we have put out. And think about how refined the lives of every single person in here are. The things that we are concerned with are nothing compared to the kinds of things that people can be concerned with on this planet. There are some really, really terrible, horrific storylines that are being played out concurrently with the life that we're sharing right here, right now. And what has caused those other stories, what's caused this story, has been the choices that people have made all along the way. The path is wonderful, the yearning of the heart, getting a response from life to help us know where lasting happiness, true fulfillment comes from. It's a fascinating story. And if we can pull back just a little bit from the human drama, from the immediate moments, we start to see just how incredible the process of awakening is. Yogananda spoke to the fact that the tests of life, the pains of life, are not there to punish us. They're there to guide us. They're there to help us to know where happiness comes from, where wholeness comes from, to bring us back into the harmony of our own nature. And then to help us as we grow in that, we become increasingly pure channels for that blessing to others. How we stand, how we hold ourselves, the thoughts that we radiate, the humming that we do, the singing that we do starts to change other people's perspective of themselves and their own lives. And the reason that these characters are up here on the altar is because when we tune into them, we start to feel the possibility of our own lives. That's the only reason. Right now, very close to us, there's a tremendous battle going on for light. The gorge is afire. It's now 33,000 acres. And I was just reading on the way in that it looks like it could easily be another 2 to 3 weeks before it's contained and easily grow to 66,000, 65, 66, 70,000 acres decimated. Gangamata said the goal, the purpose, the way God made this, the reason He made it this way, is to take people and turn their attention away from the outer things, the desires for the things of this world, the indulgences, the misplacement of energy, and to turn it back toward God. In 1989, I was living in the Bay Area, in the first urban community, really full urban community that Ananda had ever generated. It was in Palo Alto, Mountain View. And we were there remodeling it. It was a typical Ananda project. We bought a slum and had to find our way back from there because that's all we could afford. So it's a pioneering effort. And a lot of the people that had lived there before when we bought it were involved in behaviors that were not particularly uplifting. And many of them moved on as Ananda bought it and started to do the remodel, but there were some holdouts. There was one particular woman who had lived a life that most of us would probably not aspire to in this room. She was involved in prostitution. She was involved in very heavy drug use. She lived with a whole lot of critters in her pets, animals in her home that she shared with. It was a fairly painful existence inside the house. And she was determined not to leave, and she was determined to hate Ananda. And so there was this tremendous dynamic tension that was going. She was not the only one, but she was certainly kind of at the extreme of what was happening inside this little microcosm. And we were very busy creating an environment for God's light to dwell, for harmony, for peace, deep meditation on a daily basis, shared joy and creativity and God-reminding activities. And in the middle of all this, around 5 o'clock, and I think it was an August day, I was in the middle of tiling up, putting up tile on the bathroom wall, and all of a sudden I heard somebody. I was in charge of the builders at this point, and so it wasn't uncommon for people to come seek me out. This was upstairs. And I heard somebody coming up the stairs. And then I heard somebody really coming up the stairs. And then I heard somebody really big really coming up the stairs. And this is all happening within like microseconds. And then I realized I didn't know anybody that big. And there was an earthquake going on. And we had the 1989 earthquake that was in Los Gatos. And it just, pretty soon, the whole building, I'm like, well, what do I do? I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest. And so tornadoes, wind is supposed to move. The earth is supposed to be right there. So I didn't know what to do with all this movement. I thought, well, gosh, maybe I should get into the door frame. And so I got it, and I wrote it out. It was vivid. And it was compelling. As soon as there was a moment where it seemed like it was paused, I ran outside. And the trees were swaying side to side and touching the ground on either side. And the swimming pool was like a kid in a bathtub, right? You know, you slosh it back and forth. It was remarkable. And the whole peninsula, the whole San Francisco Bay Area peninsula had been rocked by this earthquake. And a couple of stories that came out of that. One of them was that out of the whole Bay Area, power was out on the whole peninsula, except for our little enclave. Somehow, power stayed on. I don't know where the source was. I don't know where the power source was because there was no other place. I drove from there down to Mountain View to the triage center because I was an EMT. I'd been training. And the power was out everywhere. And I found out power was virtually out in the entire peninsula except for our little community. So I don't know how this works, but God protects his devotees. When you are in tune with God, there's protection that is not normally there. But the other story that's so telling was these were apartments, and the laundry room for the apartment, part of the apartments that are building 1, for those who know it, right outside of the manager's office, there's a laundry room, and it also happened to be very close to where this woman's apartment was. And she was in there doing laundry. And the woman who was in charge of managing the community went running out of the office going, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru. And the woman who was so unhappy with Ananda, and she was in the laundry room, and she ran out going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And they collided. And they wrapped their arms around each other. And one's going, oh my God, the other one's going, Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru. And for a very brief time, there was this incredible sense of harmony and of upliftment and connection and a sense of abandonment of all of the pettiness and all of the smallness and all of the other patterns that were just gone. The Master said that's the purpose of God rattling this world that we live in, is to change our consciousness, to give us another point of view. It didn't last a really long time. Shoshana held on to it. The woman, but it took days. And it wasn't like, 15 minutes later she was back in trance. But in the course of days, she reverted back to her habit patterns. But you see the lasting memory of these experiences that cause people to ask questions about what's true in life. There are people for whom that 45 seconds is more vivid and real still then everything that's happened in between. These things are there to help us remember what's true. Truth invites, but karma compels. You know, the things that we choose, the fruit of those choices give us, if they're painful choices, they give us pain, outward pain. If they're uplifting choices, they bring us increasing harmony. And I'm talking to this point. You know, part of the topic is truth invites, it never commands, but we are in relationship to creation in such a way that we will get vivid reflections of our thoughts to help guide us toward wiser choices all along the way, to bring more harmony into our lives and into the lives of those around us. If we choose harmony, if we choose goodness, if we choose God, if we choose light, we become channels for that. And I want to talk specifically for just a moment because the world desperately needs not only our doing these things for our own gain and benefit, which we certainly all feel the call to. I want to live, I want my life to feel more whole. I want my life to feel more meaningful. I want to feel connected to life in ways that bring beauty and bring goodness, satisfy the deepest yearnings of my heart. But we also want that to, a friend of mine, his parents are someplace in Florida right now. And they tried to get out and the highways were crammed and the gas stations were empty and and he's deeply concerned for them. And should be. But it shouldn't be just for them. I mean, they're a small part, a meaningful part of a very large story, and every single person has the same reality running that's involved in that. So he said, "Would you pray for them?" And I said, "Yes, I will. We should all pray for them. We should pray for everybody down there." When you pray, the closer you are to God's consciousness, the more sincere you are, the more your prayers have effect, the more God responds to your prayers. But the problem with that is we can start to think, I'm the healer. I'm responsible for. One of the most beautiful prayers I ever heard, and it's one I've really tried to live with, is, Lord, bless through me, but do not let me know the blessings that flow through my prayers. Because otherwise we can become arrogant. We can become, again, more self-involved instead of just more and more humble, more and more open to the flow of God's light. But we need to pray. We need to love God. We need to reach for God's light, but then we need to pray that that light pour through us to help bless others, to help bring harmony. You know, there's enough food in this world to feed everybody. 9 billion people, 8 billion people seem like an awful lot, but they actually fit in a fairly small part. If you just put them together in a nice, comfortable way, they fit in a fairly small part of this planet. There's a lot of room here, and I'm not suggesting we should continue to overpopulate. But the problem isn't in how many people are here. And it isn't in how much food is here. It's in the kind of greed and selfishness and narrowness and closed-heartedness and lack of attunement with the divine. Those are the things that can't be sustained. I actually am a great fan of Facebook, at least the feed that I have, because I've chosen to allow a lot of different friendships, and I see a lot of things that help me understand a broader perspective of what's going on in life and how people are feeling it. So there's all of the prayers, I'm seeing the feeds about the storms down in Florida. And by the way, that storm, a friend of ours was with her mother in Puerto Rico, right in the crosshairs, and it went around them. The area, and this is not about me, but I'm just saying, prayer works. The area where my friend's parents are in Florida, the storm decided to go up the west side instead of the east side. Things change when we pray, things change when we open our hearts and act as channels, but we have to do it deliberately. It's not casual, oh gosh, I hope they're okay. We have to deeply pray and put our energy into attunement and then allow that blessing to flow through. But I lost my thought. Where was I going?
Pray.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Let me see if I can get back. But we are channels for that goodness. We need to take responsibility. Because we are going to reap the harvest. We are also, part of our karma not only is the beautiful life that we live here that's so graceful, but we also chose, and our karma chose for us, to be on this planet during times of increasing trial. And we will get the fruit of that if we don't go to the table, if we don't put our life force into helping mitigate that karma through prayer and helping uplift the consciousness of others. And that's really the only purpose that Ananda has at this point. Ananda means divine joy. It's a movement, it's not an organization, it's not a Sunday service, it's not a place. It's a movement of consciousness to support each one of us from where we are, going deep into the presence of Spirit on a daily basis, so that we live in that light. And then where, as she talked, that little rabbi, that little saint, it wasn't what he said, it was the consciousness that he held. Jesus is walking through the crowds, and a woman reaches out and touches him and is healed. It's not what we say. I know where I was going to go. We think that knowledge and information is going to be the key, and so we go and get more degrees, and we go and get more, more little badges that we can pin on. But wisdom is not knowledge. Knowledge is important, it's okay. But wisdom is deep attunement to the harmony of life. I said it earlier in another service, but it's cute. Knowledge is realizing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in fruit salad. There are a lot of things that information would tell us that wisdom would say is incomplete information. This is not appropriate. We need to learn to live from a level of wisdom and attunement, but the highest wisdom is to live in God's joy. Simply, moment by moment, in the presence of God. I want to read from Autobiography of a Yogi for just a moment by way of closing. This is from years in my master's hermitage. This is Yogananda writing about his time with Swami Sri Yukteswar. And he says, Sri Yukteswar directed the study of his own disciples by the same intensive method of one-pointedness. Wisdom is not assimilated with the eyes, but with the atoms, he said. When your conviction of a truth is not merely in your brain, but in your being, you may diffidently vouch for its meaning. He discouraged any tendency a student might have to construe book knowledge as a necessary step to spiritual realization. The rishis wrote in one-sentence profundities that commentating scholars busy themselves over for generations. Endless literary controversy is for sluggard minds. What more liberating thought than God is? Nay, God. So let's just tune into the presence of God. Feel.
Song by Swami Kriyananda from the oratorio Christ Lives represents that state of highest bliss in God. It's called In the Spirit, and it's St. John describing the state of ecstasy, cosmic consciousness. I was caught up in ecstasy. ecstasy. 'Twas a day sanctified by God. There he showed me the truths of heaven, truths which all seeking him should know. How the soul made to live in freedom can reclaim its eternal right. How the night, born of our delusions, can be fired, blazing